We're going to be continuing in the book of Hebrews today. We'll be starting in the 14th verse of the 4th chapter and going through the 10th verse of the 5th chapter. So I invite you to hear these words from the book that we love. Since then, we have a great high priest who has passed through the heavens, Jesus, the Son of God. Let us hold fast to our confession. For we do not have a high priest who is unable to sympathize with our weakness, but we have one who in every respect has been tested as we are, yet without sin. Let us therefore approach the throne of grace with boldness, so that we may receive mercy and find grace to help in the time of need. Every high priest chosen from among mortals is put in charge of things pertaining to God on their behalf, to offer gifts and sacrifices for sins. He is able to deal gently with the ignorant and the wayward, since he himself is subject to weakness. And because of this, he must offer sacrifice for his own sins, as well as for those of the people. As one does not presume to take this honor, but takes it only when called by God, just as Aaron was. So also Christ did not glorify himself in becoming a high priest, but was appointed by the one who said to him, "You are my son, today I have begotten you." As he says also in another place, "You are a priest forever according to the order of Melchizedek." In the days of his flesh, Jesus offered up prayers and supplications with loud cries and tears to the one who is able to save him from death. And he heard because of his reverent submission. Although he was a son, he learned obedience through what he suffered. And having been made perfect, he became the source of eternal salvation for all who obey him, having been designated by God a high priest according to the order of Melchizedek. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. I was gone most of the month of June, and this has been the case the last 3 years, where the majority of the month of June I have not been here in Michigan. Now, during that time when I'm away, I know my exercise pattern and my eating pattern kind of goes out the window because I'm on such a different schedule that I have a hard time maintaining the weight that I went to Minneapolis with. This June was the same as it was the last 2 Junes, where I came back and I weighed more than I did when I first left. Now, it's taken me some time, a couple of months to be honest with you, but I've successfully gotten that weight back off. In fact, a couple extra pounds, for which I'm thankful. I'm still working on a few more, in case you're wondering. You're probably not and don't care. Anyway, I do. But with that, now, Mike and I have had a really, really busy weekend. We were unpacking a storage unit, got a lot of physical exercise, especially yesterday. We're both a little bit stiff and sore. So imagine my surprise this morning when I stepped on the scale and I was 15 pounds lighter than I was yesterday. Now, we worked hard, but I kind of did one of those numbers. My eyes got real big and I thought, what on earth? How could I weigh 15 pounds less today? Well, needless to say, the corner of the scale was caught on the trim of the baseboard, so it wasn't setting level, so doggone it, when I moved it, I weighed what I did yesterday, which I'm fine with that. But, as I thought about that, I thought, I could have just gone with that and said, hey, this is great, and really kind of put on a mask and deceived myself and thought, this is great, I weigh 15 pounds less, but you know what, if I go in the closet, my deceit's not going to help me out, because I know the clothes that will fit me when I am those 15 pounds lighter are not going to fit me today. I have tried, I know, they don't. And I think that's what happens a lot with sin. We'll put on this mask and deceive ourselves and think, oh, this is okay, it's going to fit. Well, those clothes would be extremely tight and it just wouldn't work. That can happen in life. We'll put that on, and things just really don't fit the way they're supposed to or look the way that they're supposed to because our behavior isn't in line with God's will. And so interestingly, in the passage that we're looking at this morning, there's this comparison going on of something that was happening in older times, this old system, versus what's supposed to happen with this new system that Jesus Christ brings and ushers in. Now, the old system that they're talking about is the sacrificial system with the priests. And with this system, I don't know how many of you are familiar with this, but there would be priests that would come from the people of God. But the high priest in particular not only came from the people of God, but was ordained or called by God himself. So the high priest was a little bit different than a regular everyday priest that was serving in the temple. And the high priest is the only one that was allowed to go into the Holy of Holies, where the curtain or this wall, this door, separated the rest of the priests from the Ark of the Covenant and where it was believed that God's presence resided. So the high priest was the main priest, or the main one that had this connection between God and the people, and between the people and God. And so one day a year, on the Day of Atonement, the high priest would go into the Holy of Holies. And here's what would happen. As the people are gathered there to worship, the high priest would have 2 goats. One goat would be sacrificed. This goat would be slaughtered. It would make kind of a mess in there, but then it would be offered as a burnt offering, as a sacrifice to God. So that's one goat. Then what would happen is the other goat would be taken, and this was kind of a symbolic, metaphorical thing that would happen, is the people would say, okay, we're going to place our sins on this other goat. And so as those sins were symbolically or metaphorically placed on this other goat, that goat would be brought to the outside of camp where it would be let go. And so that's where we get that term scapegoat. It really is. So the sins of the people, it would be, okay, these sins are now gone because we've sacrificed and we've offered this to God. So that's what's going on with this system. And God's saying, that's not the way this is going to continue on. This is not what I had in mind. And so to get his point across, it meant that God would have to come in the form of a human in Jesus Christ. And so Jesus Christ then becomes the high priest. And there's 3 forms or 3 pieces to this job description of what it means to be a high priest. The first we heard was that every high priest chosen from among mortals is put in charge of things pertaining to God on their behalf. So the first part of this job description of being a high priest is that this person is chosen from among the mortals. Now, I know some of you are a bit young and have not had to fill out a job description yet, but I'm sure there's been paperwork that parents have filled out on your behalf. But let me ask this. Have you ever filled out either a job description or had some sort of application or paperwork you've had to fill out where it's asked you if you are a human? I never have. I might be asked what my age is, what ethnic group I'm a part of, what gender I am, but I've never been asked, are you a human being? This person is chosen from among the mortals. Therefore, this person is a human being. The only way for that to happen in the person of Jesus Christ is for God to become a human being. And we see that in the Gospel of John. In the beginning was the Word became flesh and dwelt here among us. So there's this correlation there going on with the Gospel of John and this passage as well, because when we think of what's going on in the tabernacle, it was this whole sacrificial system that was instituted. And so now what happens, and that's where God's presence was, so now what happens with Jesus Christ is we've got this tabernacle, because this dwelling among us lived, that's tabernacled is the word for it. So in the beginning was the Word, and it tabernacled among us. It lived among us. So now this tabernacle moves and goes from place to place. So this can only happen if it's a human being. That's the first requirement. Second requirement is that the priest is able to deal gently with the ignorant and wayward, since he himself is subject to weaknesses. And because of this, he must offer sacrifice for his own sins as well as those of the people. Now, the priest would be somebody, hopefully, who wasn't harsh and who was sympathetic to the sins of other people, because he himself was sinful and knew what the people were going through. This person was weak. Now, here's the difference with Jesus Christ, though, because Jesus Christ was not sinful. But Jesus Christ, being in the flesh, knew what it was to experience weakness and to be tempted. And we could look at the life of Jesus Christ and almost wonder who was tempted more than Jesus Christ. Especially when we look at his life and what happens in the wilderness when, after fasting for 40 days and for 40 nights, the tempter comes and tempts him with all kinds of things. Things that I know we struggle with, but I'm not so sure we're tempted with all three of those things in one day. And then we look at the weakness of Jesus Christ, or what he experienced the night that he was betrayed and he's praying in the garden. He prays and asks if this cup can be removed, yet not your will, but mine. We need someone who can identify with the things that we identify with, the struggles that we face, the weaknesses that we face. Only somebody who's sympathetic is able to do that, who knows what that's like. That's the second qualification. The third qualification, and one does not presume to take this honor, but takes it only when called by God, just as Aaron was. There has to be a calling from God. Jesus Christ was called by God to do this. Not only called, but obedient. And we see this in forms of other areas of ministry as well. Usually there comes a call to a vocational ministry that begins with this voice from the Holy Spirit. Sometimes it starts with the congregation recognizing gifts in a particular individual, and this congregation might say to that person, have you considered going to seminary? Or have you considered going this route of ministry and engaging in ministry full time? But there's something that is from God, this calling, that's acknowledged by the congregation. So we've got these three qualifications that come. The person's human. This person knows what it is to experience weakness or to be tempted, and is called by God. So what difference does this make for us? How would we apply this? And actually, Hebrews is kind of a tough book to preach. We knew this from going in the Bible study. This was kind of a weighty book to get through. It's a pretty dense writing. The writer includes here how we can apply it to our lives right at the beginning of this passage, for which I'm thankful. Let us hold fast to our confession. In other words, don't give up. Don't give up. Have you ever felt just like throwing your hands up in the air and quitting? I got people raising their hands already back. And quitting and saying, I can't do this. You might not like to hear this. There are days I feel that way too, where I just feel like quitting, giving up. And then I realize when those things are coming out of my mouth, it's because of the weakness I'm experiencing. That it's a moment of weakness, and perhaps there's some sort of temptation. And at that point, then I need to realize that, it's time to take off that mask. I can't just pretend it's not there. I have to acknowledge it, own it, and say, this is how I'm feeling today, and acknowledge that before God, but it might sometimes even mean then that I acknowledge it to somebody else. And I said, which I have done on occasion, and just let somebody know that, I'm really going through a tough time and I'm struggling. And the amount of support, I feel released when I do that, but then the amount of support that I get from God through that, and then from usually the other person, is just incredible. It's okay, Lynne. You have this high priest. His name is Jesus Christ. God came in the flesh. God knows what it is to struggle, to be tempted, and was called by God. I think Jesus knows what you're going through. So don't give up. And then we get the second way we can apply this right here at the beginning of this passage too. Let us therefore approach the throne of grace with boldness so that we may receive mercy and find grace to help in every time of need. And if I were to paraphrase that, I would say, come just as you are. Come as you are. Take off the mask. You don't need to pretend. I can stand here and pretend I'm 15 pounds lighter, but you know what? I'm not. We can take off that mask and we can approach the throne of grace with confidence and with boldness. Not because of anything we've done, though. Not because of our own merit or because of deserving it. But it's because of God's grace. Because that old sacrificial system didn't work. And unfortunately, the people of God were abusing it, misusing it. And people got so confused, wondering, what does God even want from us anymore? We don't even know. And so God made it abundantly clear. This is what it looks like. Except for I'm going to come to show you in person what this really is supposed to look like. So then it becomes this struggle. Well, we've never heard of Jesus called a high priest before. You don't have to go through all of these rituals anymore. Because in Jesus Christ, that barrier or that wall or that curtain that separates God's presence, the Holy of Holies, from you, was torn from top to bottom. The moment Jesus breathed his last. At that very moment, the veil of the temple was torn in two. We have access to God 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, because of Jesus Christ, our great high priest. Take off the mask, it's okay. We don't have to pretend anymore. Would you pray with me?